We all know about the microbiome, and there's many biomes in the body. The skin has its own, of course, and of course the gut microbiome, which most people are understanding, and its importance in overall bodily health. Our next speaker has an amazing background in the sciences, primarily in biochemistry, physiology, sports physiotherapy, and been active in that area and in the health, and particularly the natural health arena since about 1990, averaging it out. And he's actually going to speak about how, in different ways, the microbiome can contribute to better health and particularly better skin health. And this particular session is sponsored by BioAs and Biotenica Water, and that's the white cans that you've got and hopefully are drinking. So you're going to be all super healthy just by drinking water. But Jeffrey Flood is going to tell you a little bit more about that and a whole lot else about the microbiome. So thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks for the invitation to come and speak. And yeah, the Biochemistry water you're drinking includes an ingredient from our company, BioAs. We produce functional ingredients, symbiotic ingredients that can go into skincare, oral care, food, beverage, animal products, all sorts of stuff. So kind of talking about things we're playing with all the time at our work. The microbiome, what I want to do today, you've probably heard 1,000 lectures, I've read 1 million papers and listened to podcasts like Huberman and others about the microbiome. And what I want to do is I want to just kind of maybe slightly change your perspective on it today. One of the things, I'll get it in a sec. There we go. Is there a delay? Is this a little slight delay? Yeah, okay. How do you define you? So if I ask somebody, you know, where do you physically start and finish? And it's a really interesting question because you think, oh, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? You know, that's me there and this isn't me. But it's actually not that clear. And I want you to really think about this for a moment while I'm trying to change slides. It's almost impossible to say where you begin and finish. So if I took the microbiome out of your body or off your body, you wouldn't live, you'd be dead pretty quickly. So the question is that actually part of you or not? Because if you can't function without it, surely then it's part of you, is it not? And a lot of the microbiome research now, you'll see them referring to the microbiome as an actual organ, as a virtual organ for our body. So anatomically, we can say, yes, this is where you are and this is where you start and finish, but that's not a living anatomy. That's like a dead body. As soon as you add life, it changes. Your anatomy completely changes, and it must include the microbiome. And that microbiome, like down here on the coast, you have the ocean washing up on the beach. The beach is always there, the ocean is always there, but the conditions change, don't they? And the beach constantly changes its shape and its form depending on the environment it's in. Not just the ocean, it can be the rain, the weather, other things happening to it. Natural and unnatural. Constantly change that situation. And that's the way you need to think about your microbiome. This constantly changing, constantly evolving biome, which is an ecosystem that an ecosystem is a collection of multiple biomes, and we are a discrete biome within an ecosystem. So living with different people in a house for 6 weeks and walking around barefoot, you will start to share the same gut microflora. You only have to be in the house with them. It's amazing, isn't it? You do a fecal transplant on someone, sounds gross, but immediately their lung microbiome changes. How can that be? They're not breathing farts, right? It changes. Everything is so connected, everything. And how do we differentiate between the different biomes? In the intro, so you've got different biomes. Have we? We are, literally, our whole body is a biome. A pregnant mother, when she gives birth, the dendritic cells in her gut have little branches that come out into the gut lumen, into where all the food and everything is, and grabs hold of the bacteria in the gut, pulls it in, circles it with a little bubble, if you like, sends it off in the lymphatic tissue in the blood to the breast, and the breast tissue grabs that, pulls it in and puts it in the breast milk so that your baby takes in what's in your gut microbiome. The body's amazing. And so what you have to do is completely change the way you think about your body. You are this constantly evolving ecosystem. So the question is there something wrong with you or not? What I often say is when you're presented with a situation where you don't feel well or something's not working as well as it should, you don't look as good as you should, is it because you're broken? No, your skin cells don't wake up in the morning and think, you know what, I'll just take the day off. Bugger it. She's going to look ugly today. You know? Nuh-uh. That doesn't happen. Every nanosecond of every day, every cell in your body is doing its Aussie's best to do its job perfectly, given the environment that we've put them in. So the question is, what have I done to change the way that my cells are functioning to give me the outcome I've got now? And if you're not happy with it, we often look something outside to come in and help, yeah? But you've got to change that thought. I'm changing the way my environment, I'm changing what I'm doing for my cells. Sometimes that's something outside, but sometimes it might not be. It might be as simple as the way you think. Louis Pasteur did a lot of good and he did a lot of bad. There's a gentleman at the same time called Louis Beauchamp. One's called terrain theory, one's called germ theory. Both are right. This is not about one or the other. It's like yin and yang, right? Both are right. But this image is pretty profound, isn't it? Everyone looks at the tank and goes, just clean it. Yes, just clean it. But some people now would say, no, you've got to vaccinate that thing, or you've got to put some chemical in there. You've got to do something to protect that fish. Sure, and in some situations you may need to. What can I do to change my environment? Do I need something from outside or can I do something from the inside? Maybe I need both. You'll see lots of images like this. I just picked one off the internet to show you, you know. And my point here is the microbiome is massive, absolutely massive, constantly evolving, constantly changing. Bacteria, fungi, viruses, phages, bacteriophages. But it doesn't just include that. It also includes all the metabolites that those things produce. It also includes all the dead cells, all the damaged virus, all the particles, the fragments of those dead cells, the organelles on the insides that spew out when that bacteria dies and lyses. All of those things are involved in the microbiome. It is not just bacteria or living things. It is a whole series of different things. So if you want to understand the microbiome and its effect on how we express our humanness, you need to understand everything in the microbiome. And quite rightly, Philip mentioned the epigenetics and the metabolome. You're talking about the metagenomics. There's over 100 times more genetic material in our microbiome than there is in us. And without that genetic material, without all those genes in the microbiome, we're dead. There are many vitamins and minerals and other things we just don't have access to without the microbiome. Next generation sequencing, you may hear a lot about. It's just a lot of kind of nerdy technical stuff about how we go about understanding it. And that's really helped us kind of lift the lid on the microbiome. Now we're starting to realise what it really does. You can get very technically quickly, so I'm not going to do that. I'll try and stay a bit more general today. Obviously, the beginning we get in life is really important. I picked this one because it talks about atopic dermatitis or atopic issues. A vaginal delivery, like if your mum gives a natural birth and she breastfeeds, you've got a fantastic start. Your chance of getting some kind of atopic issue is much, much reduced. But if you have a cesarean section, you're going to miss the microbiome in the birth canal. You're only going to get what's on the skin. And if you're not breastfed, where are you? You're way behind the curve, aren't you? You are not exposed to that. You need to be exposed to that microbiome to get a good start. The health of the mother at the time of birth and during pregnancy will determine how that baby's immune system develops. So not just at birth, during pregnancy and at birth. And those first 4 years of life are important. There are four kind of areas. If we're going to split the area, let's consider, because they've kind of got different shapes. One is obviously the skin, yeah? Then we've got the urogenital system, the gut, everyone knows about, but also the oral, nasal, and respiratory system. So they're the kind of four discrete areas of the biome. I'm completely hopeless with this. Here we go. We'll start with the gut. It's easy because everyone thinks about the microbiome. You talk about the microbiota, which is the bacteria, and the living things in there, the genetic material. There's about 250 square metres about in your gastrointestinal tract. Obviously, massive surface area. So any part of our body that is exposed to the external world, that's where we have things living on us in great abundance. Yeah, every exposed surface. So your gut's obvious. You're obviously putting things in there all the time. Massive microbiome, massive surface area. And those, it's not, remember I said it's not just the living things, it's also the metabolites, the things they produce. And it's also the things they eat. And it all starts to get mixed up, which will go later. What's pre, what's post, biotics. These are all kind of messed up. The more we start to realise, the more we realise that is this dynamic ecosystem in there. But the main thing is, all of these microbiomes, they eat something, they metabolize it, and they produce chemicals. And those chemicals either interact with the other elements in the microbiome, so they influence each other, or they directly influence us. And that influence can be good or it can be bad. Depends on what that actual chemical is and what balance the whole microbiome is in. Diversity, biodiversity is the key. The more diversity, the better. Why? The more diversity of genetic material in the microbiome. The more genetic material, the more opportunities we have. We're going to talk about epigenetics later, but if you think of epigenetics, think of your genetic code, including the genome in the microbiome. Think of it as keys on the piano. The more keys you have, obviously, the more notes you can play. Yeah? And so our thoughts, our movements, all these things are like the music that goes with the keys. I'll come back to that later. Sorry, press the screen again. Mouth. Don't really think about the mouth a lot, but there's a huge microbiome, of course, in the mouth. And it influences your tooth. Did you know that teeth can remineralize? So the odontoblasts in the teeth are actually constantly remineralizing your tooth. All of them. Yeah? So everything you're doing in your mouth is damaging the teeth. Your teeth are constantly rebuilding through odontoblasts, so you actually can remineralize teeth. And the microbiome is directly related to it. But have you ever thought about why is it that if we have a dysfunctional or a dysbiosis in our mouth that we can end up with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease or cystic fibrosis, all sorts of things. Everything's connected, right? Talked a little bit about the urogenital system. The obvious one we'll point out is the female reproductive tract, and we talked about how that influences the baby. Yeah, both. You don't just get the bacteria when you're born. You actually get it as you're in your mother's belly developing. You are actually exposed to bacteria the whole time. We used to think that there was this barrier that prevented bacteria and viruses and other things getting into developing embryo. That is not true. Yeah? The skin. I love the picture on the top left. We're filthy, aren't we? Really, when you think about it. And actually, the dirtier you are, the better, right? Your skin loves dirt. If you look at the microbiome of the skin and you look at the actual profile of what's on there, a lot of them are skin-borne microbes. Dirt-borne microbes. They're things you find out in the soil. I used to do with a lot of patients, particularly with intractable eczema and some terrible psoriasis, things like that, and just get them to go out and say, look, just go and start your own vegetable garden. Make your own soils, compost. Don't wear gloves. Get dirty. Get out there and do it. And then pick those things, give them a quick rinse and eat them. And actually, it's one of the best ways to re-establish a microbiome on the skin, particularly around the hands, the bits and the knees, the areas that are in touch with the soil. Get dirty. So we're filthy, aren't we? There's only about 2 square metres of skin, but it's a massive organ. It's the biggest organ in our body. And it's not just there as a barrier, of course, it's neuroendocrine and it's an immune modulating organ. Yeah. It also has direct impact on our estrogen and testosterone levels through the keratinocytes. So the fibroblasts, the keratinocytes, and the microbiome are all constantly talking to each other. How deep does the microbiome go into our skin? Does anyone know? Go on, someone say. You're all chicken. Deep, right through. A lot will think it's just sitting on the surface and the epidermis, maybe a little bit in the dermis. Goes all the way through the adipose tissue under that basal membrane level, right down into the blood vessel, into all in the connective tissue, down deep under your skin. We really don't know how far it goes, but we keep finding these things all the way down, and they've all got a role to play. We all talk about the gut-skin axis and gut-brain axis. Oh my God, how many axes do we have to find? Forget about all the different axes. Just do this. Make it simple for yourself. Every physiological system, every organ, every biochemical pathway in your body is in some way influenced by your microbiome. And a lot of them we're not sure how yet. We're still learning. We've literally got our trainer wheels on when it comes to this. But every single system in your body is somehow connected to your microbiome. And if you really want to dig deep, you want to get a little bit of technical on yourself and you want to kind of, the 80-20 rule, you want to get somewhere, go and look up aryl hydrocarbon receptors, AHRs, and look up toll-like receptors. They're two good areas. If you can get to understand those two receptors, you start to get an understanding of exactly how your microbiome impacts your entire body and all your organ systems. So what affects our microbiome? How can we start to influence our environment? Okay, I'm not happy, I'm not well, there's something going on, I want to change my microbiome and I want to move it towards a more healthy status so my cells can express the humanness in a much, much more functional and healthy way. Well, of course, people talk about diet and exercise isn't just because my heart rate gets up, it's about sweat, and it's about those fluids spilling out onto my skin to actually start providing a chemical stimulus to modulate or modify my skin microbiome. And getting out, if I'm exercising, and particularly I could be bumping into other people, getting a bit of their sweat, getting a few of their skin cells, some dirt. All these things make a big difference. But there's so many things that can affect our microbiome. Just your thoughts will affect your microbiome, literally. So your emotional state will affect it. And vice versa. As you know, your microbiome will affect the way that you think and what your base level kind of emotional state is. But what you drink, what you eat, your exercise, your emotion, genes, not just yours, but the genes in the microbiome as well. Your family, pick your mother and father well. Sleep has a huge impact. Breathing, how much you breathe, specifically and purposely over-breathing versus under-breathing, these things can strongly affect your microbiome in very short time periods. And obviously the environment we're in. Everyone says, yeah, don't get too dirty, keep the kids from getting dirty, don't do this. But don't get it too clean. Honestly, we're designed to be just filthy. Get out there and get as much natural on you as possible. Yeah? And that means touching other people, breathing on each other, kissing each other, hugging each other. Literally, we're meant to be doing that, including your pets. People with pets always have a healthier microbiome and less inflammation. Epigenetics. So like I was saying, think of your genetic code like the keys on the piano. If you play the piano like me, it's pretty ugly. It won't express itself so well, right? No one will like the look of that. But I'm sure some of you can play the piano beautifully, put some nice music there, you can play that piano, but I can play jazz, I can do blues, I can do classical. There's all sorts of different stories that can come out of that same set of keys, yeah? And it seems like there's an infinite number of pieces of music that can be expressed by this limited number of keys. That's the way you must think about genetic code, not just ours, but the genetic profile of our whole microbiome, yeah? And you can tune that piano. You can put different keys in there. You can add more. You can add this by creating biodiversity within your microbiome. You can overcome certain limitations in your own limited genetic code that you got from mum and dad. And by the way, which changes during your life as well. So the same person put in different environments with different choices will express their genetic profile differently. So epigenetics is really just how do we express, or which keys do we push in the genetic profile that we have available to us. And if you want a better outcome, diversify, increase the number of keys, retune your piano, and you'll get different piece of music coming out. No longer can you turn a blind eye to what we're putting in us and on us. And this is kind of one of the things I wanted everyone to think about today. When you start understanding the impact of the microbiome on all aspects of our health, what we put on our skin directly influences our organ systems, our gut health, our emotional health. It's not obvious straight away, but it can happen over time. And sometimes I think in the next 15 years, there'll be some pretty interesting information coming that's not so great about things that we've all done before. We need to really consider this. You're trying to get a change. You're looking for something that's going to stimulate a change. Look for something that's going to do it in a way that's natural, kind of linking back to what Philip said at the beginning. Let nature take its course. What can I do to introduce this person's body to an environment where it gets to express itself better? How do I actually help it express itself better without it doing any harm? Do no harm. See, whilst you've got something that works well, don't put it with something else that's going to pull it down. Yeah. We specialise in the production of ingredients that people can use in food products, beverage products, oral care, personal care, nutraceutical, animal-based products. That's what we do. And we specialise in postbiotics, prebiotics, and probiotics. So to do that, first step is you have to understand what a microbiome looks like, and you immediately get overwhelmed by the diversity. There is an incredible number, thousands of different and ongoing. And the new generation sequencing we have that identifies what's in the microbiome isn't specific enough to tell us down to strain level. It's quite difficult to work out exactly what's going on. But we are starting to see patterns. So we understand generally, again, the 80-20 rule, right? 20% are going to do probably 80% of the good stuff. Are there others in the microbiome that could do that? Sure. There's probably 300 extras. But if there's one that we know does a certain number of good things and we can work with it and it does no harm, that's usually where we'll start. And the next question is, well, what does this probiotic want? What does it need to thrive? Because most of the probiotics you take orally, for example, I'll talk about the gut because it's easy to understand. Most of the probiotics you take are not staying in your gut. They don't colonise. They just go straight through. So what's the benefit in taking them? Well, while they're there, they are actually probably doing something. They're eating something and producing something. So you'll get a transitory effect. But unless you keep it up, they're not going to colonise your gut. So you're not actually going to get the benefit from it. So one of the things that we focus on is, well, what probiotic can we take that will have the best chance of colonising your gut? Colonising your gut, or forming a colony in your skin, joining your microbiome wherever it is in your body. So that's the first question we face, is which one can we work with that has the best possible chance of being incorporated into your microbiome? The next question is, what does it need? What does it need to do that? And then what does it need to be well and happy and thrive? So there's how does it implant? How does it become part of that microbiome, whether it's the oral cavity, the skin, or your gut? What do I need to put with it? And again, do no harm. Don't put something in there that's going to help it colonise but actually could cause other problems. Just don't do it. So we always go nature's first. One of our values as a company is nature first. Okay, let's just look. There's an infinite wisdom out there in nature. I hope you all agree with that. We're trying to understand it, and by understanding it better, we look to help people. So we look at nature and say, well, nature obviously knows how to do this, so what is it doing? And then how does that work on us, depending on what biome we're working with? So that's what we work with. So then we come up with prebiotics. Now, prebiotics are generally substrates or chemicals that the actual bacteria, let's say, we'll just talk about bacteria, they metabolize, they use as energy or fuel. So when you think of that, you think of carbohydrates, usually oligosaccharides, so 3 carbon chains on, and fibers, which are about 14 carbons on, chains longer than that. So you talk about fiber, you hear about oligosaccharides. Sugars are usually 1 or 2 carbons long, so sucrose, fructose, etc. But we're talking about oligosaccharides, and these are longer chain carbohydrates that actually we can't break down ourselves, but the bacteria love them. So you're thinking things like inulin, for example. Yeah, chicory root. And so I'm pretty sure Biotica water's got inulin in it, yeah. So the water you're drinking has got inulin in it, for a very specific reason, because when you get inulin and you isolate it from chicory root, you don't end up with just one chain of carbon of a specific length. Guess what you end up with? A whole potpourri of different oligosaccharides and fibers that give the full spectrum of nutrition for the bacteria. Just like we just don't want to eat broccoli every day. It might be healthy, but life would be a bit boring. It's just the same for the bacteria. They want to have a variety. They want to have a smorgasbord. And each of those different substrates create a different outcome or impact in their own metabolism, the bacteria's metabolism. So you want to put things in there that feed the bacteria and allow them to thrive and express themselves fully. So that's generally what prebiotics are. Postbiotics are actually dead probiotics. Yeah? Dead probiotics, dead cells. But not just dead cells, they're actually dead cells that are then broken apart. So dead cells with a hole in them. Then dead cells that are completely fallen apart into lots of different random pieces. So lots of cell membrane. Think about all the organelles and all the information inside that cell. That spews out. That's all postbiotic. Yeah? But not only that, postbiotics are also the products produced by a healthy living probiotic. So short-chain fatty acids, butyric acid, for example, propionic acid, you would have heard of a lot of these things, obviously, in what you're doing. So all those short-chain fatty acids, which are messengers, for example, particularly modulating our immune system, they are byproducts of a healthy probiotic metabolism, and they're a postbiotic. So postbiotics are this incredible milieu of all these different products, anatomical, structural pieces, as well as biochemical pieces. And turns out, a lot of those, I'll go to the next slide, a lot of those postbiotics, a lot of those postbiotics are actually also prebiotics. So there's this virtuous circle between the whole thing. As you'd imagine with an ecosystem, it's just not like a one-line thing, is it? There's a constant overturning of everything. So a lot of those postbiotics can actually now also be defined as prebiotics as well. So that's what we do. We specialize in putting together ingredients that you can use in your products and others, like food companies and drink companies, companies like Biotica Water, to put those ingredients in there that when you expose them to your microbiome will shift it towards, if you like, a more functional, I hate to say good, because there isn't necessarily good or bad, right? Because even the baddies in your gut do a really good job, because they signal your gut wall, they signal your immune system, whether it's your skin, your gut, your mouth, wherever they are, they actually train you to understand what the baddies in the outside world look like. And also then the goodies modulate how many of them there are, so that you constantly get that message to stay vigilant, but you don't get too much so you become unwell. Yeah. So it's about bouncing up. And that's what we do. And you already got a preview. You know Peanuts, right? Charlie Brown. So everyone looks down on Pigpen. And I'm not sure if you know much about Peanuts, probably shows my age a bit. But Peanuts says he has the dust of all civilizations past. And you think, oh, yeah, it's actually quite profound. And he's unhappy. There's a cartoon strip where he got in the rain, he washed off. And you could see this, this young boy there, and he was so angry because all of that dirt of civilizations past had great value to him. And he expressed that it actually made him think better, and that's why he wanted to be the president of the United States. He wanted to be a leader in the community because he had the dust of civilizations past guiding him. Actually, that's quite profound when you think about it, when you start considering the microbiome. And that's the way you've got to think about it. When we're dealing with people, we're dealing with the microbiome, we're not looking to treat someone who's sick or broken. Their body's doing their best given the environment they're in. Look to change their environment. I've finished. If anyone's got any questions, I'm pretty short of time, I guess. I'm happy to take some. Otherwise, I'll be here. I'm hanging around outside. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone. I'll try not to get too nerdy. Right. Has anyone got any questions? No? Cool. Guys, love to talk to you. We're outside. Thanks for letting me talk.